Having said that, we'll now get into our conversation. Each of you will have 2 to 3 minutes for opening remarks, and we'll start with Kelly Brough.
Thank you, Coach Bailey, and thank you all. Everybody was worried that snow might keep us home, but we're Coloradans. We've been here a long time. I'm grateful for this opportunity, and thank you to the panel. Throughout this campaign, I have shared my personal story, and I'm going to share it again today, not because I see my family as victims or because I want your sympathy. I share it because this is the story of so many in Denver today. I lost my father to violent crime. I look today at the families who are victims of crime and struggling, trying to put the pieces of their life back together, and I understand it. I'm committed in my administration to preventing crime because of the very experience I've been through. My family received government assistance. I know the shame families feel because of that, but the truth is every single person gets help in their life from someone. Some of us just need it from government. And frankly, I'd be honored to be your mayor and provide the safety net that allows families to get back on their feet, and I'll never make them feel less than because of it. My husband struggled with an addiction our entire life together. And I know how hard it is in the pit in your stomach when you're trying to figure out how to love and support someone but not enable them. And my girls and I lost Mike to suicide. I share this with you because these are the issues we're struggling with in Denver today. But I also know this. I know my privilege as a white woman. And I learned that at a young age too, when I started dating and then I married my husband who was indigenous. And what I experienced firsthand in being married to him and raising 2 biracial daughters is the privilege I was given simply because of the color of my skin. These experiences shaped me. Every value I have, every decision I've made in my life has been shaped by how I've grown up and who I've loved. Those decisions have not only guided me so far, they'll guide me as your mayor. And I really look forward to today's conversation about what I hope to do and intend to do as your mayor. Thank you again.
Thank you all so much for having us, and thank you for being here. Delighted to be back. I was thinking of a quote, I think Pastor Burleson, you said this about 10 years ago, but if I'm not, I remembered it from you, which was, 2009, I had just been elected to the state senate. I'd spent a couple of years before that working for President Obama. And when I got elected, the first thing we did is opened a community office over in the Holly at 33rd and Hudson. Many of you have been there over the 10 years that I was in that office. But when we were there, we had a grand opening day, and it was fantastic. We did a big barbecue, had a couple hundred folks, and the Montbello band came and marched, and it was wonderful. And then it probably wasn't a couple days later when we had a drive-by shooting at that same office, and we had to all come together and sit down and talk with community members, and someone said, Mike, everybody loves to ride in a limo when it's running. The question is who's going to walk with you when it breaks down? And that meant we had to start doing some walking to try to put things back together, and that was what we spent a lot of the next 10 years doing. That meant everything from efforts to make sure we could revive opportunities for work in the neighborhood. It meant being there to walk when it was time to work with Senator Fields on things like the CLEAR Act to suss out racial profiling in every part of our criminal justice system. It meant working on things like banning the chokehold. It meant being present for things like realizing the huge crisis that was kindergarten access and preschool access in this city so we could pass universal preschool for the first time statewide. It meant being present when we realized that we had to take real action to try to close the wealth gap in the city, when we saw the gap between black and white home ownership here and knew that something had to be done because these truths were not created by race-neutral policies and they wouldn't be fixed by race-neutral policies, which is why we helped launch the Deerfield Fund with Khadijah Haynes, other folks in the room who were part early, to provide down payment assistance for families who wanted to get access to buying homes and staying in this neighborhood. It meant when COVID hit and we saw the disparate impact of who was getting access to tests and who was getting access to vaccines, we were here through the COVID check effort we were running to make sure we got equitable distribution of the vaccines in neighborhoods all over this city. That's the long walk we've been on, and I think I've been delighted to be here walking on the days when the limo broke down and walking on the days when even Obama came to town. And so I think there's been a lot of work we've done together, a lot of work we can do together. I think now is a question of the crossroads we stand at of what kind of Denver we're going to build. I want to make sure we build a Denver where every neighborhood thrives, and the opportunity of a vibrant and affordable and safe Denver shows up in all of our neighborhoods, not just some. And that's why I'm here. Thanks for having me.
Patricia Duncan, first question.
Good afternoon and congratulations. To be the top 2 out of 23 candidates is amazing. So congratulations to you. I am a proud graduate of Denver South High School. And so my question is going to be about education, and this is for both of you. How will you build a bridge between the city and Denver Public Schools? What resources are available and what resources will you add?
Kelly, you can go first, and then Michael, you'll go, and each of you have 1 to 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you. This one's really important to me because I'm dyslexic. I went to only public schools my entire life, not because my parents were making a statement, but because that was the option we had. And that's true for so many kids in our schools today. For me, I focus on that 3rd grade reading. Today, 1 in 4 of our kids of color or low-income kids are reading at grade level in 3rd grade. And as a kid who was taught to read by my teacher in 3rd grade, what I now know is she changed the course of my life. I'm committed to making sure we change the course of lives for our kids as well. I think it requires the combination of 2 things, accountability and support for our school system. One is, I think we have to regain the trust and confidence in community with the governance of our school board. And I think we have real work to do. In November, we have 3 seats that are up for us to vote on. I would work with community to identify who would restore confidence to ensure we're focused on keeping our kids safe and delivering the education they deserve. But at the same moment, I would move to support and ensure we're helping our kids get to that finish line. Some things I would do is the city historically had a city school coordinating committee. This is where our school board members, the mayor, and city council met regularly to talk about how we could support each other and get more work done together. When I was in the Hickenlooper administration as chief of staff,
30 seconds.
we started picking up trash to save money for the schools so they didn't have to pay for it. I would fund paid apprenticeships and internships for our high school kids so they'd work with the city of Denver, earning and learning while they're going to high school. We know through Arupe, this increases completion. I would focus on partnership for purchasing where we could save money together so we could put more money into the classroom and help support the outcomes we need to achieve. Frankly, I would do what it takes to make sure our kids get the education they deserve because our future demands it.
Mike?
Thank you so much for this question. Proud to have been a teacher and a school principal myself, so know both sides of this, both what it takes to lead and support schools and what it's going to take to be a good partner to them. I think there are 3 places we're fundamentally failing right now. The first right now is we know that there is a massive need for mental health for young people in our school system, and particularly after not just the crises of COVID, but the crises of the school violence we've seen over the course of the last year. And the city's responsible for funding Denver Health to be able to support those school-based health clinics. We're not providing Denver Health the resources they need to actually make sure there are counselors in every one of our high schools. We got to be able to expand that content so we make sure that every kid in the system has access to the mental health support that they need. That would be number 1. Number 2 is we know a big part of the inequality that is growing in our school system right now is not just what's happening from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's what's happening after school and on weekends and on summer programs where families who have the resources to pay can send their kids to science camp or to math tutoring or to a competitive girls basketball team. Those young kids who can't are missing access to that or missing the chance to get exposed to those positive peer groups that make such a huge difference. I would expand a program we worked with folks in this room on to give young people access to after-school programming if they're on free or reduced lunch. I think those two are going to be critical steps. And third, I do think the mayor has to be able to be a citywide advocate for schools and for parents and for teachers. That means being able to push for a closer partnership with the school board and with the school district on
30
things that we
seconds.
can. And it means being able to stand up and publicly support kids when we need to. I did that when we had disagreements about what to do after the second shooting at East High School. I believe that if teachers and parents and educators wanted the ability to have the school resource officers back in their building, they ought to be able to have that decision. I came out and publicly supported that, was glad to see the school board reverse their decision on that. So I think it's a matter of building relationships, committing to the partnership, funding mental health and after school programming, and being able to stand up for the city in moments when the city needs you to.
Time.
Tory Massey.
Thank you for making reference to the relationship between the address from which a child comes from and the impact it has on how he or she shows up in the community. So with that being said, I'd like to know from each of you, what is your plan for continuous engagement in the communities that you very easily frequent during the campaign trail? But where do we see you and how do we engage with you from this point forward? That's extremely important, in my opinion, for my community.
Mike, you want to go first?
Happy to. Thank you for this question. And I think in this case, I think what I have done is as important as what I will do, because it's always the best example of how you'll show up. And for me, that was the reason why when I got elected to the state senate, I was the only elected official that opened a community office. I knew that people expect you to come find you at the Capitol. I think it's much more important to be in community where folks that can find you. And particularly in all of Northeast Denver, a lot of places we could have put an office. I put one in the Holly because I thought that was the place where folks who felt like it was hardest to get access to their elected officials could know they could walk in the door and be able to ask a question or lodge a complaint or raise an issue. We also established what we called citizens cabinets, which were representatives of community members who had either lived experience or thoughts about criminal justice or about economic development. And you find, if you're talking about workforce development, it's very helpful to have folks across the street who've been to the workforce office 3 times and can't get a call back and can't be able to get an application submitted. And so I built those advisory groups of the community members themselves who are going to be able to advise us on those key issues. That's what I'll do as mayor. I'll both be in community regularly. We'll have office hours. We'll also have regular standing meetings of community leaders who can give us feedback proactively on things we're working on and be able to make sure that those people who are worried about having access the most are the places where I am the most present. Because I think that's your job as mayor. That's what I did as state senator and what I would do as mayor. Thanks for the question.
Okay.
Like Mike, I think the only effective way you can address the inequities we continue to see in our economy is to engage communities where those inequities are still occurring. I would do the same thing I've done in my history. And I'll give you an example. I built an entire arm of the Chamber of Commerce that focuses on nothing but the inequities of race and gender in our economy, called Prosper Colorado. And how I built it and identified the 3 priority areas were community, telling me income disparity, home ownership, and entrepreneurship are the 3 areas it focuses on. I helped lead the effort to fund the Denver Prosperity Fund, which ensures our lowest income kids, when they graduate from Denver public schools, can go to college. It was community that was very clear that the barrier was cost, and we needed to break down that barrier. I would do the same thing I did with the Small Business Development Center that I was responsible for at the Chamber. It was the community who helped me develop that program to support primarily people of color in starting businesses and being successful, and resulted us in being recognized as best in the nation in 2012. That kind of work, I think in the mayor's office, not only will I invite it, but you will see people directly responsible for making that connection and not just asking you to reach to us, but us reaching to you every time we're building something to try to make sure we build it right and we have the right priorities to address the inequities we're so committed to addressing.
Kevin Marchman. First question to Kelly Brough.
The question of homelessness in the city has been a recurring theme. What is your plan to address this problem for the short term and the long term?
Yeah, I really appreciate having 2 minutes instead of 30 seconds to answer a question. And I really appreciated Mr. Watson's comments about it earlier. I agree with him. It's a crisis, a humanity crisis. I think last year 173 people died living on our streets simply because they're unhoused. In my administration, I intend to ensure that isn't the case. So here's what I would do. The endless sweeps we conduct today, we know, are not improving the living conditions of those who are unhoused or the neighborhoods where they're living. Instead, I would temporarily sanction locations where we could very quickly get people to safer sites, where we have running water, bathrooms, supports and services coming to people, where we can get them off the street in a crisis where their lives are threatened because of weather, and protect them. At the same moment, I'd be working with the region. What we know is today, Denver actually is providing more support because we're the only city who has significant resources to help support people who are unhoused. We need the region's help to address this issue, or we can't successfully address it. 5 sitting mayors in the metro area have endorsed this strategy, that we work together on this work, and endorsed me as a candidate. I also have started discussions with the state, and frankly, I have to recognize Councilwoman Ortega, who highlighted this through this process. Ridgeview, Hudson, Fort Logan, where we have the opportunity to have meaningful transitional housing, where we can begin to get people indoors, get them the support and help they need so they can transition back to the life they envision and the opportunities they'd like in their own lives. And finally, prevention.
30
this
seconds.
Is key. We know it's less expensive to prevent someone from losing their housing than to try to deal with the trauma and support them in being rehoused. You will see a shift for me and ask the region to focus on how we keep people housed. And frankly, cities around this nation are doing a much better job at preventing people becoming unhoused than we are, and there's huge potential to do this work.
Time.
Thank you. Very excited that to have been working on this problem very deliberately the last 2 years and building a statewide coalition around this issue that led to the passage of Proposition 123, which was the first statewide ballot measure to take on both affordable housing and homelessness statewide that will bring about $50 million a year to Denver to solve this problem. And here's exactly what we know works, Kevin, and here's what we would do. And there are actually examples of this right now that we have already built. The 3 things are, first, we know we actually have to build housing for people that is dignified and stable and protects you on a day like today when it's snowing outside. That means we need to build tiny homes. So what I would do is take half-acre sites around the city. You can go see one at 40th and Marion when you leave here. You can put about 40 units on that site. These things are heated, they're air conditioned. You got a key and a lock, place to store your stuff. You got a bed. You have a dignified, stable safe where you can get your life back together. Most importantly, on these sites, you can then bring all the wraparound services people need. You can do workforce training, you can do mental health support, you can do addiction treatment. And third, it actually respects and understands the way people build community who are unhoused, which is the idea of opening a community as a community means you can go to people that are living in encampments right now, and you can take 2 or 3 encampments and rehouse them all together to a new community where those bonds that exist are protected. We know people want this housing. When we did this project with Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, more than 800 people signed up to want to be able to get these units. We know people want them. And we know they succeed in this type of structure. When we did this project, more than 86% of the people who went into that housing were still housed a year later. So we know this can work. We know it will work at scale. We now know, thanks to Proposition 123, we have the resources to make it work, both to put staff on those sites and to get these units built using the federal dollars that we have available right now that I've talked with Governor Polis about already. So that is what we can do. The best city in the country right now has dropped their homeless population about 40%. That's Houston. We could have a real path to do 85% with the results we've had already if we take those results to scale. And that'll be job 1 for me when I become mayor.
Reverend Burleson, starting with Mike.
Yeah, to Mr. Johnston and also to Ms. Kelly Brough. I've worked on the Citizen Oversight Board for 13 years under John Hickenlooper and Mayor Michael Hancock. My question is, will there be any changes in the safety agencies, the Sheriff Department, Police Department, and also the Fire Department, which is now with Elias Diggins, Chief Ron Thomas, and Desmond Fulton? Will there be any changes in those safety agencies, and are you comfortable with the Office of Independent Monitor as it is today?
I've met with each of those 3 folks that you just named and had great conversations with them about what's working right now and what's not working. And I've made the same statement about those 3 roles I had about all the cabinet roles, which is I think it's incumbent upon the new mayor to take a look at each department we have in the city, what's working well, what's not, and do a real robust search on who we think the best potential leaders are for those roles. I would consider all the folks that are in the roles currently as applicants for that, but I would not close off any role to say that there isn't the opening for additional applicants. I think that what I'd want to do is look at the best and the brightest all across the city, and so that would be my plan for those. I think the independent monitor has been doing good work in establishing a strong relationship. I think we want to make sure we build a relationship where we're both recruiting a force, both in the fire department and in the police department and in the sheriff's office, that is diverse and representative of the communities that they serve, and that we're doing a better job at recruiting them more quickly, frankly. One of the challenges we'll hear right now is the current civil service process for recruiting often takes about 7 months before someone can even know if they're prepared to be an applicant to enter the academy. Our surrounding districts maybe take 60 to 90 days, which means we are losing candidates all the time, particularly diverse candidates of color and women, to other jurisdictions. And so we got to figure out how we can both recruit a more diverse pipeline and be able to get better, quicker offers to those candidates so we don't lose them. So for me, that's one of the key issues. We'll need to restore the morale in those departments by restoring the actual staff that they're down right now.
I really appreciate this question because it also ties back to an earlier question about how will I engage community in my administration, and it'll start by who I hire into cabinet positions. I'll add the executive director or the manager of safety into this as well, because these are probably the most critical positions that the next mayor will be hiring. What I would do is create a stakeholder group of diverse residents helping identify what are the most critical issues in each of these departments, and going through the applicants and identifying who do you believe are the top candidates I should be interviewing. I would ask that stakeholder group to send me the top 2 or 3 candidates, and I will hire from that. I do hope some of the existing, as I watch Chief Thomas and the confidence he's creating in community and with our officers, that's rare and it's hard. So I would invite them to be part of that process. I do think the independent monitor works. I got the chance to be there at the beginning of that. And I think it's important as we start to try to build trust in community, and this is fundamental. I will also tell you, I think our sheriff's department is in crisis. We're about 30% down in our deputy sheriffs. This is not a civil service position. This is career service. I would partner with career service and identify what do we believe are the real barriers to hiring sheriffs, and what could we do differently to change that, because I don't think we're going to successfully keep the sheriffs we have, given how much we're asking them to
30
do today.
seconds.
And lastly, on the Civil Service Commission, I've had the chance to serve on that body. I have deep respect for the work they do. I also know they'll be an incredible partner as we try to figure out how can we speed up, and yet hire good officers. I know Councilwoman Sandoval is leading some of that work, and frankly, I'd look forward to the partnership as mayor to help support those efforts and ensure we get great officers as timely as we can.
Time.
Dr. Watkins?
Thank you both. Good morning again. Thank you both. Thank you.
You got 2 microphones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for being back again among us and with us and speaking with us one-on-one. We appreciate that. There are so many questions surrounding this watershed moment in Denver, Colorado, in the state, in the nation, in the world. And you will be, should you win or not win, you'll be in a unique position to make a considerable impact on the future of the city and the state. Recently, Governor Polis appointed individuals to a American 250 Commission and Colorado 150 Commission, and you're familiar with that. We'll be celebrating the history of this state and our cities around the country, states around the country, in 2026. You will be the mayor then, and for another X number of years. So my question to you, with this being a time to reflect, for introspection as a community, as a city, as a state, our accomplishments, achievements, the things we're proud of, the huge challenges that we've been talking about for months and this morning. the socioeconomic, political, environmental, and other issues that you've addressed, that many have addressed. What do you want to be able to say and raise up in 2026 that you have done in your leadership with all of the communities working together to move us forward through the rest of this decade and in the next 20 to 25 years, making it specific, but recognizing and acknowledging that things aren't done overnight, and there has to be a level of sustainability, not just moving and making independent or individual achievements. I've been in civil rights for over 30 years, for 40 years. And somebody's being smart. So we've made, I love the city, I love the state, I love the community. What are you going to talk about you impacted that will be something everyone can celebrate?
Time.
I got to tell you, if somebody said you're going to be asked a question that you haven't been asked yet, I'd be like, that would be impossible. You've done it, and I love this question. And I want to start by just saying, my husband and I moved from Montana in 1986 to Denver, Colorado, and not by chance. We chose a city where we felt a mixed-race couple would be successful, and Denver delivered on its promise for us. As mayor, I intend to restore that promise for everyone in our city. And so my hope is I'll describe to you what that means to me, but that is exactly what I would be heading to do. And I think there's a few things I've learned being a first-time candidate. We create a political system that actually begs us to diminish other people, that demands that we talk about the flaws in everyone else around us instead of identify the strengths. And it is really hard, but I am committed to not doing that, because I believe if we are going to achieve my vision of what we'd be celebrating together, we'd be recreating community, coming together, recognizing even when we disagree the power in each of us and the value of those opinions in shaping our future. I believe we'd be creating a vision of our future together even when they're in direct conflict and we have to resolve those conflicts. I also believe this: the physical manifestation to me of being able to accomplish that we would be able to restore 5 Points in a manner that honors its history culturally, but also displays a future that people want to be part of and they want to
30 seconds.
experience from around the nation when they come to Denver, because we have done such a beautiful job of honoring our history in probably one of the most unique and special places we have in this city that we have not delivered on yet. And that would be the physical manifestation for me of just what you described.
Thank you.
So if it were 2026 and it was our 150th anniversary for Denver, we were 3 years into the administration, here's what I hope it would look like. It would look like a city that is thriving economically, but when you went to every neighborhood around the city, you would see those neighborhoods thriving equally. And you would see small startup businesses led by women and people of color that got financing and funding and grew and created brands that felt uniquely Denver. It would be a place where you could go to any neighborhood in the city and you could walk in and drop your kid or your grandkid off at an elementary school, and that kindergarten teacher could pick up your daughter and give them a big hug, and you would know that kindergarten teacher could still afford to live in this same city that she serves. Right? You would both have economic prosperity and you would have access. And you would have a place where you could go out and celebrate at any given night. You could be out at a dinner or out at a ball game downtown or at a theater, and you could walk back to your car or to the light rail or to your house, and you would find that you were living in a city where nobody has to sleep on the streets. For me, that would be an amazing 150th birthday for Denver, is to say this is a place where both we're thriving and we're all thriving in all of our neighborhoods, and that's the vision I'd like to see us build.
Thank you both.
Can't hear you, Raj.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
I also appreciate your support on 20 in the Park Hill Golf Course. I'd like to really hear about your plans, specifically the first 100 days addressing the black community and your 3 top priorities.
Now, Raj, that's the next forum on the 13th. But because you've asked a question and the cat is already out the bag, candidates, please answer. You want to repeat it, Raj? You think you said the first 100 days?
Yeah, first 100 days, your 3 top priorities for the Black community, your tasks, your goals, and outcomes if you have them.
Who's up first?
I think it's you, Mark.
Great. Okay, so top priorities for the first 100 days for the Black community specifically. I think the first part of that is the pre-100 days, which is the development of the transition, which is how do you actually be able to stand up the leadership you're going to need to run this city, which is about how do you build a broad coalition of community leaders to help build the stakeholder process to be able to get the right team in place all across the city. That's critically important. But once we got to day one, we were in office. I think the top 3 priorities for me become one, homelessness. We know right now it disproportionately affects our communities of color. They're disproportionately represented as people that are unhoused. Being able to get these micro communities stood up and people access to housing and services quickly. It's 2, housing. We know how urgent affordable housing is. My plan is to try to permit 3,000 units that will be permanently affordable in the first year. That means those are people that who lived in those units. Anyone who makes $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year or less are eligible. They would be able to live in those units and know they don't have to pay more than 30% of whatever they make to rent. And the rent can't go up unless your income goes up. So a teacher or a nurse or a firefighter or a server could know they could actually be able to stay in Denver and not worry about getting pushed out every month. And then the third is public safety, is making sure we could help be able to get a sense of real safety back in all of our communities. And that does mean restoring our population of officers and of sheriffs and of firefighters, but it also means getting more first responders onto the street. That would include mental health workers and paramedics to respond to those types of crises. And it would mean building a real authentic relationship of community-based policing, getting officers back where they can be out walking beats, talking to neighbors in the Holly, in conversation with kids and families, that reestablishes the kind of relationships I think we had once in the past that we've lost over the last couple of years. So those would be the top 3 priorities for me.
Kelly?
The top 3 priorities for me are very similar. I'll try to highlight specifics, though, from the Black community perspective. One is housing, getting people to safer locations immediately. The goal there for me, and I'd count it by lives saved. The second issue, though, I think around housing right now is I'm extremely concerned, continue to be concerned about gentrification throughout our city. And I would focus on making sure we're seeing more and more elderly people who are both becoming unhoused, but also struggling. And so making sure they're aware of the programs we have in place to assist with paying taxes, providing rebates, and exemptions to paying those taxes, including paying the new trash fee. I would also focus on making sure we're putting out an RFP for master leasing to try to bring down those rent prices and provide some relief, and frankly, to help prevent. So the city now is in the pipeline of preventing people from becoming unhoused. Second issue would be public safety. Increasing our mental health responders to ensure we're sending the right people to the right issue. It's working better for community, it's working better for our officers, and frankly, frees our officers up to be where they should be. But at the same moment, also recognizing we still have communities that feel over-policed, and communities who want more officers. I think in this day and age, we're capable of responding to those issues together and getting the right level of policing and the right activities in every community. And I'd work with community to get that right. Third issue, I'm going to say education, because of the urgency of the moment, both in terms of safety, but also in terms of support. And I would immediately stand up the City School Coordinating Committee and begin working with community on how we can ensure our schools are able to deliver the education our kids deserve.
Thank you.
Jonathan McMillan?
A very brief question. I would like to know from each of you, do you have plans on codifying the Office of Social Equity and Innovation, the Youth Violence Prevention Action Table, and how will you personally support the Crime Prevention and Control Commission?
Yeah, these are just codifying it. I could ask City Council and would be happy to partner with City Council on codifying such critical ongoing issues that we have to be working from, so yes. That said, I also want to give you an example of why I think that work is so important. Again, when I was chief of staff, one summer in May of one year, the chief of police came to me and said, we're seeing a rise in gang violence, and it's primarily our kids. We're very concerned. You could imagine sometimes what a chief of police suggests is if we could authorize overtime and put more officers on the street, but what you and I know, that doesn't impact our kids. Instead, that was the first summer we got funding, actually went to the private sector. I got it from Kaiser, and we got funding to open our rec centers for free. In exchange for that funding, we tracked our kids as victims of crime and committing crime, and we saw both go down. I'm so proud today that we still provide free access to our kids. I would work with those entities to identify what are the other steps we should be taking to address the drivers, to make sure our kids have the recreational opportunities and connections through Parks and Rec and our libraries and our schools, to ensure they're getting an education, real access to economic opportunity. We know that's a critical issue. Forming relationships with adults throughout our community that are healthy and positive. Those are the things I'd focus on with every other member of my cabinet to ensure that the commission
30 seconds.
And that work is driving our priorities, so we're helping create a future for our kids as well.
Thanks, Jonathan. When I think about the work so short answer is yes. I think these are critical partners we got to do more and better with and by, and I'd support the codification. When I think about the work you've been leading over the last decade, right, I think the opposite of crime is not public safety, right? The opposite of crime is joy, right? It's like, how are you actually see communities and neighborhoods that are vibrant and alive with joy rather than are you just managing problems? And so this is about really what are we doing to cultivate that kind of joy and support in all of those neighborhoods? And I think that does look like a couple of things. I think it looks a lot like prevention. It looks like how do you find the place where kids find their spark, where they find what they love doing every day, whether that is a sport, whether that is an art, or whether that is a science camp at the Science Museum. I think this was why we led the effort to grow a program called My Spark to give kids access to that, because the best way to keep you out of a negative peer group is to get you into a positive one and to get you into one early and often, to get you under Coach Bailey's tutelage or someone else's. So I think that is critically important on step one. The second is intervention. You know this incredibly well, but once we know that a young person has been involved in some sort of criminal activity, once they've been found once with a gun on them, the likelihood they're going to then go on to hurt themselves or get killed themselves goes up astronomically. And that's why the city has to wrap around in a really powerful way to make sure that young person and all their family has all the support they need, whether that's multi-systemic therapy,
30 seconds.
for families at home. And I think that's what we have to do a lot more of. And then we got to look at what the city can do. I'm working with some of the partners. I'm working on this idea of the night mayor, M-A-Y-O-R, not nightmare, but the night mayor, which is how do you think deliberately about what this city does after the city closes down? What happens from 5 p.m. to midnight every night, not just downtown, but in every neighborhood? And how are you building really positive, engaging opportunities for all people, but definitely for young people in all neighborhoods of the city after our offices shut down? I think that's going to be a really exciting and important opportunity.
Time.
All right, so let's give both of our mayoral candidates a big hand. We're not quite finished with them. We're going to give each one of them a minute or two to make closing remarks. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that the next forum is going to be here on May 13th. Runoff election day is Tuesday, June 6th. And as you make your final comments, let me give you some food for thought. Let us be lovers. We'll marry our fortunes together. I got some real estate here in my bag. So we bought a pack of cigarettes and Mrs. Wagner's pies, and we walked off to look for America. I said as we boarded a Greyhound in Pittsburgh, Michigan seems a dream to me now. It took me 4 days to hitchhike from Saginaw, and I've gone to look for America. Laughing on the bus, playing games with the faces, she said the man in the gabardine suit was a spy. I said, be careful, his bow tie is really a camera. Tossed me a cigarette. I think there's one in my coat. We smoked in the last one an hour ago. So I looked at the scenery. She read her magazine, and the moon rose over an open field. I'm lost. I said, though I knew she was sleeping, and I'm empty and aching, and I don't know why. counting the cars on the New Jersey Turnpike. They've all come to look for America. All come to look for America. Today, we've all come to look for a better Denver. And so, having said that, please make your closing comments on what would be a better Denver. I think, Kelly, you're up.
Thank you, Coach Bailey. I really appreciate the poem. You know, every single thing I have in my life is because I chose this city with my husband. And I'm so grateful. And frankly, I'm also so grateful to still be standing in this race. Everybody told me I probably wouldn't be. That as a first-time candidate, I wouldn't get this far, and I'm so grateful for that. And I don't want to overlook the many people in this community who have helped me get here to this moment today, both in helping me understand challenges and build systems that can actually work for all of us. For me, you know my personal background. It's that lived experience that I think prepared me for this moment. But I think it's my professional experience that prepared me for this office. You know, I've been the head of HR for the city. You saw I plowed snow on the runways of our old airport. That's true. I was chief of staff to John Hickenlooper when he was mayor, which means I was responsible for the day-to-day operations of the city, for building and managing to the budgets of the city, for solving the challenges you faced every single day. I've been the head of the Chamber of Commerce, a complex and large organization. And I know this, on day one, I can hit the ground running. And I think we have real work to do. And I'm running this campaign in a manner that I hope brings us together to do that work. Because I believe the only way the next mayor will be successful if she is someone who unites us as a community, who together builds a vision with you, not for you, with you, of what our city can look like and what we need to be. And I am committed to doing that together. And I'll also say this, I'm also committed to making sure every one of our kids knows, no matter what the challenges they face at this moment, no matter how hard their life has been, there is a community here that is going to hold them long enough to help them find the promise of Denver for them and their families too. I would love to have your support to get to that finish line on June 6th, and I thank you so much for your time today.
Time.
Here's a memory I have that for me is a great model actually for what the Better Denver feels like, which is this is a moment where it can feel divided. It can feel like there are problems that feel bigger than us. It can feel like maybe we're not going to find a way out together. And I think about, I don't remember the summer, it was 5 or 6 summers ago, and there were real disagreements in this neighborhood. There were real battles between community leaders about both worries about increasing levels of violence and worries about over-policing. And there were strong advocates on both sides pushing on that. And then you probably remember the night I do when you got the call that there had been a shooting at City Park Jazz. And then we found out about an hour later that Selena Hollis, who was one of the officers from District 2 here, had been shot and killed there. And the next morning, we knew she was going to have a little girl who was going to not have her mom come home. And there was a series of District 2 officers who were going to go out on their patrol without Selena and start that day. And so we started talking to a group of community leaders over at the Holly and say, what can we do? And in about 5 hours, we got probably 75 or 80 community members who every single one of them made something, cooked something, brought something, and we were all standing at the District 2 office when those officers came back for the first time on their first shift without Selena. And there was a long line of community members there to just give those people hugs as they walked in the door. People who had been the loudest voices holding them accountable, who had fought with them day in and day out and were angry at them, were the first ones to give them the biggest hugs. Because they realized, like, when we're losing people in this neighborhood, we're all losing. And when we're facing challenges around violence or community separation, we're all losing. It doesn't mean we can't disagree. It doesn't mean they weren't going to sit back down 3 days later at a community event and talk about their disagreements. But it did mean there was a moment and there was a vision to say, this city is bigger than any one of us. And if we have the chance to pull all of us together, you're going to be able to deliver something that is much bigger than what we currently see. there is a desire and a vision for a bigger, fuller, more inclusive Denver, and that's the chance we have to build that over the next 50 days so we can make sure we deliver that over the next 8 years. That's why I'm in this race. That's what I'm hoping we can do together. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.